The day that I was born, my father was being tortured. The Khmer Rouge was an army that wanted to transform Cambodia into a communist country. They started a revolution, and the revolution became a genocide. It's estimated that between 3 to 4 million people were murdered. We were at the concentration camp for a year or a little bit over a year. But my mother told me that when she got wind that my father was going to be executed, she snuck out of her cabin and she went looking for him. She figured out where he was. She went and she saw him, and she said that she couldn't recognize him, that he's been tortured so badly. My mother told him that I'm okay, that she's okay. She knew that he couldn't go with us, and she knew that we couldn't stay. So there was really no choice but to leave. And she left, and that was the last time she saw him. The trek from the concentration camp to Thailand was an amazing story in itself, because one, it took days, and you had a group of people that didn't really know each other too much, but they all depended on each other. And they knew that the Khmer Rouge was out in the jungles looking for them. During the trek, I got really sick, and I kept on crying, and people were telling her to basically leave me behind because I was putting everybody's life in jeopardy, and she refused to let me go. We eventually got to Thailand, and we ended up at a refugee camp in Thailand for probably another year or two. And then she met my stepfather, and they had my little sister, and we got sponsored to come to the United States. And I wish it was a happy story, but Brooklyn in the 80s, it was another killing field. We lived on 61st Street. Every summer, they would close down the street for a block party. But this one day in particular, I was playing under a fire hydrant, a bunch of little kids having fun, and all of a sudden it became chaotic. People running, people screaming, and instead of running with people, I ran in the opposite direction. I wanted to know exactly where the commotion was coming from. I was curious. And as I was walking towards, where the commotion was coming from, all of a sudden I heard a loud bang. And I looked down at my leg, and it was just full of blood. It was just tons of blood. And half of my body was burnt from gunpowder, I found out. It was fighting over money, and a shotgun was pulled out, and I just happened to walk in the crossfire. My stepfather became very abusive, extremely abusive. Not to make excuses, but I think he also suffered a lot of mental illness. He was tortured. I had ran away from home because my stepfather's abuse got really bad, and I was living with my uncle, and we got into a fight, and he said he expected that type of behavior from a bastard. And I said, wow, what do you mean by that? And he goes, what, are you stupid? Didn't you not realize that that's not your father? But because of that fight with my uncle, I had to go back home. And I remember my mother, realizing that I had no clothes to go back to school. She took the money that was supposed to go towards the utilities and paid for my clothes. And that night, my stepfather beat her really bad. And as he was hitting her, I kept on saying, we should leave. Let's go. We should leave him. And I remember him turning and looking at me. He was like, how dare you disrespect me? How dare you disrespect your father? And I said, you're not my father. And I saw his face. He was caught off guard that I knew. And he came at me, and I just wailed on him. And I just closed my eyes and just kept on punching and kicking, and we haven't seen him since. was an angry kid. I was an angry kid trying to find myself. I barely graduated high school. When no other school was willing to take you, follow was your last resort. And, there was a turning point in 11th grade because of me discovering my learning disability. I found out I was dyslexic. But also because I noticed that all of my friends were gone. All of them dropped out of high school, people in jail. I had friends who had kids really early, so they were no longer in school. So it was a big turning point. And then I met this guy who was offering me a second chance. He was an administrator, and he was just telling me, if you're serious, I can help you, but you have to be serious. I had this conversation with Willie Dardell, the mentor I was telling you about. He goes, let me ask you a question. He goes, when do you make the most money selling dope? And I go, that's easy. It's the first of the month. And he's like, why? He's like, that's when everybody got the welfare checks. And he goes, okay. And he goes, what do you think about kids? I said, what do you mean? He's like, well, what do you think about kids? You like kids? What do you think about little kids? I was like, oh, I love little kids. And he goes, well, you ever think about those kids? I said, what are you talking about? He goes, you ever think about that parent that spent the entire month's worth of grocery on dope? And how you are affecting that family? And it hit me. That made me very angry at myself. That really caused me to look at, that entire situation differently. Because I saw myself in that. So having that conversation with him was a big turning point. Because I saw drugs differently. Well, I was looking for anything that was different than what I had been experiencing. I remember watching the documentary of Malcolm X, and it was powerful, and I got really curious and into Islam. That structure was something I needed. Religion was a part of that, but being accepted into a new group, right? That was very important. I don't think I would have been able to make that transition successfully if it wasn't for meeting people that embraced me. When I was about 21, I knew I wanted to be married. I wanted a family of my own, really. I wanted to be loved. I wanted to provide love. I was telling my friends that I'm definitely ready to get married, and they said they had a person in mind. So we got invited to this barbecue. We both knew that we wanted to get married. She wanted to get married too. So the conversation was very straightforward. It's almost like a business transaction. What do you want out of life? What are you looking to do? We really connected, to a point where it's just like I had a hard time being away from her. We got married in a month after meeting. It was because of her upbringing and her environment that made me want it more. So yes, I struggled in high school, but with her support, with her coaching me, she was probably the best tutor I ever had. She would sit down and go over my homework with me. She would edit my papers, proofread my stuff. She would correct my broken language, and she really pushed me. I realized this is something that I can be successful at. Completing my doctorate was an amazing accomplishment. I want so much for my daughter. I have never want so much for someone in my life. I want her to do great things, but I also want her to find herself in a way that I didn't. I want her to pursue her dreams and aspirations and feel very confident in herself. As long as she's confident in herself, I'm very happy. I could have been this angry kid that turned into an angry adult because of my abuse, because of the loss of my father, because of experiencing genocide, because of being shot at. I could have easily been that angry kid that turned into an angry man that would have been caught in the public system. But instead, it was through these experiences that made me stronger, that made me better, that provided me opportunities that would not exist if it wasn't for those experiences. So yes, those experiences were horrific, they were unfortunate, but there was a purpose.